Okay, so now I just give you, but I will not solve this problem, but you'll do it quite easily, I think. Draw all 16 spanning trees of K4. K4 is the graph, the complete graph with 4 vertices. You can draw it like this, or if you prefer, without crossings, like this, and so it will not be difficult to find all of them. You just know that there must be 16 of them, and so you can know by yourself whether you have solved the problem or not. If you find that they are less than 16, then you're missing some. If there are more, then either you're repeating or you have not really spanning trees. Okay, now to this applied problem. The connector problem. You have a railway network connecting a number of towns to be set up, okay? And you want to have links between, so you want that it's possible to reach every town from every other town, okay? With the minimum possible cost, okay? And so, surely, again, you will need a spanning tree. Why spanning? Because you want every town to be reached. Why tree? Because if you have a cycle, that means that you have more than one way of reaching one town A from one town B, and so that's not economical. You're thinking in the idea of having the biggest possible economy, okay? And so you have weights, and you may think of lengths on all edges, so positive numbers at each edge, and you want to have a selection of these edges so that you get a subgraph which is spanning and which is connected. And so if you want it to be minimal, since you want to be that the sum of all weights is minimal, then it has to be a spanning tree. How can you do it? How can you produce such a graph? By what is called Kruskal's algorithm, which is this here. Start with the link which with the loud, please.
Can I ask two questions?
Sure.
Would it be possible if you explain the shortest path algorithm one more time?
The Dijkstra's algorithm?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, sure. Let me do like this. I explain this on this graph, and then I do the same thing, but with Dijkstra's algorithm, okay? So I finish this, and so the comparison, I'm very much interested also in exams on the difference between the two problems and the two solutions. Dijkstra's algorithm, to what does it, to which question, which problem does it give an answer, and Kruskal's. Okay, so it will be a good thing to compare the two problems and the two solutions on the same graph. Okay, so let me just end up with this. Kruskal's algorithm starts by looking for an edge with minimal weight. You might have several with minimal weight. That's why they say a link such that W of V1, which is the weight we have on the edge, is as small as possible. Okay, and so this is the initialization of a recursive algorithm. Okay, next you think that you have already chosen and put together edges E1, E2 up to EI, and then you have to choose a further edge. How do you choose it? You must have two conditions: that the edge EI plus 1 which you add must give you a graph with the previous ones, a graph which is acyclic. So you must not close a cycle by adding this edge ei plus 1. And provided you don't close a cycle, how do you choose it? Among the ones which do not close a cycle, you choose it with the minimal weight among these which do not close the cycle. Okay, and then you go on, and when you're done, you are bound. It's possible to prove that you're bound to end with a spanning tree, if you started, of course, with the connected graph, and with the spanning tree on which the sum of all weights is as small as possible. Okay? Let me stress the difference between this problem and Dijkstra's. In this problem, you do not have a special vertex, a privileged vertex. Okay? You want to build it with as small as possible total weight. This is not always so with Dijkstra's algorithm. Dijkstra's algorithm does not aim at minimizing the whole connection, but minimizing the connections from a given particular vertex. Okay? And so, let's see what happens in this case. Okay. So you have this big graph, okay, with numbers which are hundreds of miles between New York and what are they? Okay, London, Mexico City, New York, Paris, Peking, and Tokyo. Okay, so what do? You look at all the weights, okay, and then you see that there is just one edge with the minimal weight, which is 2, okay, and so you choose it. Now you have to find another edge, 1, which does not close the cycle, but none will close the cycle because we don't have multiple edges, and with minimal weight among the ones which do not close the cycle. I look and look and look and find this with weight 13. Okay? So there is already a difference between this algorithm and the one of Dijkstra, because with Dijkstra you always had at each stage you have always a connected graph. Here, you don't have a connected graph at this stage, okay? You will get it at the very end, or before, but surely at the end, you'll get a spanning tree. Okay, so now, we have to choose another, and I see what has not been chosen yet, and I find this one, which is with weight 21. Okay, then, so these 3 are taken. Call them E1, E2, and E3. Now I have to choose an E4, and I look and look, and there is this with weight 35, which is again the least possible weight among the ones of the edges not yet taken. Okay, so I take it. All right. Now, this is an important moment. The next smallest weight is this one, 36. But you are not allowed to take it. Why? Because you would close the cycle. Okay? So you don't take that. Forget about that because it would close the cycle, and then look for the one next minimal weight edge. And you have actually 2 possible choices, either this or this with weight 51. Okay? And the authors I've chosen, I've chosen that one. Okay, and now what happens is that every other edge would close the cycle. Other way to say that, you actually have got a spanning tree. Okay, so all vertices have been reached and all vertices have been connected. Okay. What is the difference from say dice-cross algorithm on what can we see? For instance, taking this as the privileged vertex. Okay. Let me draw that. Well, it's a little bit big, but we'll do it. Okay. Putting all weights is a bit okay. Anyway, 36, 57, 51, 61, 2, and 2. And from here, 68, 35, 68, 35, 21, 57 I already have, 78, 70, 56, 56, and here 35 and 2, and 51 and 60, 60, 70, 68, 61, 30. Okay, I should have everything. Okay, now if I want to, what is this town? PA? What is it? Paris, okay. So, we are in Paris, and we want to have minimal paths starting from Paris, okay? So, what shall we do? Let's see what we have at a minimal distance, okay? We have this, which is 2. I lost you. Ah, you are there. Okay. This which is 2, okay? So, I choose it, and I put 2 for saying this vertex has distance 2 from my important vertex. Next, I have 36, 57, 61, 51. What about here? 2 plus 56, 2 plus 35. That's interesting, but it's 37, and so 36 beats it. Okay? 2 plus 60, 2 plus 51. So my next one is 36. Why? Because even going through through this vertex, I would get a longer path, okay? Longer in the sense, greater sum of the weights I have on the edges. And so this is the distance 36. Now I have to go from this or this or this, by summing this as 0, of course, as distance from itself. So I can have 50, 57, 61, 51, or 36 plus 21 is again 57, okay? So I might either go like this or like this.
But you have 51.
Oh yeah, great, thank you. 51 here. Yes, so 51 is better than 57, so I have this. And here I am at distance 51. Okay, so now this would give me 64, but I have 61 here, I have 57 here, and I guess that nothing beats this. Yep. Because here I have 58 if I go this way, and I get 57 if I go this way, or also this way. It's indifferent if I go 36 plus 21, or if I go directly, okay? So I go directly.
So I think that's number 53 order from 2 to
50, can I get the 53?
yeah,
Where?
from the end that is like above. You have a 2 and then 53.
Oh, no, but it's already taken. It's already taken, okay? It's already 51, so 53 is no use, okay? Thank you anyway. 57, and then now I have just this to reach, and what about, oh, okay, in this case it's very easy because 61 is better than 64 or 62, or, yep. Okay, in this case it's terribly easy if you take this, okay, so 61. But you may try starting from instance from New York instead, okay, and see, and you'll get a different spanning tree. In this case it's a very simple spanning tree, okay. And in any case, what is important for what I'm saying, it is a different solution than what I get from Kruskal's algorithm. Kruskal's algorithm gives me a total weight which is less than this, okay? So assume that you are the boss of the European Union and you are not willing to make a favor to Angela Merkel or to Macron or to this one or to that one, okay? And so you just want to have a minimal total connection, okay? So you don't want to make a privilege to Frankfurt or Berlin or Paris, and then you use Kruskal. You are Berlin-centric, and then you use Dijkstra. You are Paris-centric, you use Dijkstra from Paris, and so on. Okay? So please remember this difference. Any questions about that? Okay, so this is a first type of optimization, two different types of optimizations. Why? Because we have two different tasks, okay? All right, so now we can go to a new strictly related chapter, which is connectivity. As I mentioned, either Dijkstra's or Kruskal's algorithm give me something which is minimal, okay? And so if you break one of these edges, one of these connections, your graph becomes disconnected, okay? And so it is economical, it is what you have done, it's the most economical possible. Kruskals from one particular vertex, Kruskals in general, but it is not safe because any interruption would surely mean that you disconnect all the things, okay? Some 20 years ago, in Italy, we had something like that. Of course, you cannot, even the Italians cannot remember that because they were very, very small children. But we had that one morning we waked up and there was no electricity, and I thought, well, what's happened? And then I discovered that all of Italy was without electricity, and that was because of a damned tree which had fallen in Switzerland on a very precious line, and which had, well, it had destroyed that particular connection. It was not the only connection, it was not a cut edge, but then it made an overload on all the other connections, and so all power plants went tilt, and we had in Italy for some 3/4 of an hour no electricity at all in all of the nation, okay? So it's not exactly losing connection, but having a connection which is not safe enough, okay? And so how can we measure how safe a connection is, okay? I can tell you that the theory of this chapter has a birthday, very precise birthday, and it is during World War II. Exactly because you may know that there were the Allied troops on the European continent, okay, and there were the German troops, of course, which had all logistic possibilities because the front was connected directly to the heart of Germany, and so weapons, ammunition, food was easy to take to the front from Germany, okay? Whereas it was a big problem for the British and even more for the Americans to get all what was needed to be allied on Europe. Can you follow me? Okay, so what they did was to try to understand what could be a minimal bombing for destroying the connection between Germany and the German front, okay? And so they had all this immense graph of streets and railways, and they wanted to bomb, I think that the Scottish who are particularly cautious with money, and they wanted to save bombs. Americans generally are not so worried about saving bombs, and so they love bombing, and if they can put a bomb somewhere, they do. Okay, you might know, Italians know, we still find, I think, once or twice in a month, in the territory of Italy, some bomb of the World War II. Surely in the last month there was one. In the last 6 months there were a couple here in our region, for instance. That after 70 years, so you understand how much it was bombed. I mean, if those bombs which did not explode are still there and we still find them, imagine the ones which exploded, okay? But, okay, without the Americans who don't think very much about the economy of bombing, the British had that problem, and so they invented connectivity ingress, which means on one side you can say, how can I make my network safe? And on the other side, how can I destroy the connection of a network? Okay. In a tree is a minimally connected graph. Deleting any edge disconnects it, okay? And so you have these graphs here. Here you can see whatever you do, whatever bombing you do, you disconnect it. Here there is a very clear, nice bombing. If you delete this vertex, you are disconnecting the graph. If you are deleting edges, deleting one edge is not enough for disconnecting. You must delete at least two edges in order to disconnect the graph, okay? So you see that the number of vertices and the number of edges that you need to delete for disconnecting the graph may be different. Here what happens? Here deleting a single vertex is not enough. Deleting three edges is enough for disconnecting the graph, meaning at least for leaving this vertex as an isolated one, okay? How many vertices with all of their incident edges do you need to destroy here for disconnecting the graph? How many vertices? Three is enough. If I delete, for instance, these three, then I get two isolated vertices, okay? An interesting thing is that if you have a complete graph, you have no possibility of disconnecting. You can destroy but not disconnect it, unless you destroy all the edges going to one particular vertex. So it's possible to destroy edges and make it disconnected, but not if you destroy a vertex. Whatever vertex you destroy, you are left with the connected graph. Okay, so you see different problems if you think in terms of vertices or in terms of edges. And again, it's something I already mentioned to you. You have some problem, some solution in terms of vertices. You always ask yourself, what happens if I do the same thing with the edges and conversely, okay? Now we are taking, in this chapter, we are taking the two problems together, meaning that we define we have already three notions to use. One is the notion of cut edge. If you have a cut edge, then your even if your graph is not a tree, connection is not safe, because deleting that particular edge would disconnect a connected graph, okay? Same thing with the cut vertex, unless you have loops, but forget about that particular thing. If you have a loopless graph, if you have a cut vertex, it means that its deletion makes the number of components greater. So if you start with a connected graph and you have a cut vertex, not the vertex of a loop, then its deletion makes the graph disconnected, okay? But then we have also the notion of edge cut, so a certain set of edges whose deletion makes the graph disconnected. And we have also a similar notion here, a vertex cut of G is a subset V prime of V, such that starting from a connected graph G, such that if you take away those vertices, and of course all edges having that those vertices as ends, is disconnected. A K vertex cut is a vertex cut of K elements. A complete graph has no vertex cut, as we said before in the case of the picture. In fact, what are the only graphs which do not have vertex cuts? Those that contain complete graphs as spanning subgraphs. So you might have multiple edges, and so you might have that apart from multiple edges, your graph is actually a complete graph, then you don't have any cut, any vertex cut. So if you have that a graph does not contain a subgraph which is a spanning subgraph which is a complete graph, so that at least one pair of distinct non-adjacent vertices, you call the connectivity. This is Greek letter kappa. Kappa of G is the minimum K for which G has a K vertex cut. Otherwise, meaning if your graph is substantially a complete graph, you define kappa of G to be simply ni minus 1, the number of vertices minus 1, even if there is no ni minus 1 cut vertex cut. So what happens if you have kappa of G equals 0? It is either trivial or disconnected. Trivial is what a graph with just one vertex and as many loops as you want, or a disconnected graph. G is said to be K connected if kappa of G is greater than or equal to K. All non-trivial connected graphs are at least one connected, okay? And now we recall what an edge cut is. It is a subset of this form, bracket, square bracket S, S bar, square bracket, where S is a non-empty proper subset of V. So a certain set of vertices, and S bar is the complement, meaning all the other vertices which are not in S. And this indication, this symbol means all the set of all edges which have exactly one end in S and one end in S bar. Okay, a K edge cut is an edge cut of K elements. If G is non-trivial, so not just one vertex, and E prime is an edge cut of G, then G minus E prime is disconnected. What is the edge connectivity kappa prime? Kappa prime of G is the minimum K for which G has a K edge cut. If G is trivial, then it has no edge cut, and we, by convention, define kappa prime of G to be 0. So kappa prime of G equals 0 means that G either is trivial or is disconnected. And kappa prime G equal to 1 is simply a connected graph with a cut edge. G is said to be K edge connected if kappa prime of G is greater than or equal to K. Okay, and all non-trivial connected graphs are one edge connected. Okay, that said, what can we say? Kappa is always less than or equal to kappa prime, always less than or equal to small delta. The last part is very easy. Why? Because if you have a small delta equal, say, to 5, it means there is a vertex which has degree 5, and all other vertices have at least a degree 5 and may possibly more. Okay, but then what happens if you delete all edges, all 5 edges incident to that particular vertex? You get that vertex becomes isolated, and so you have disconnected the graph. And so you might have also that kappa prime is even strictly less than small delta, but surely small delta, there is always the possibility of disconnecting the graph by deleting small delta particular edges, the ones incident to a vertex of minimum degree. Okay. This graph is nice for seeing this. Why? Because how many vertices do you need to delete if you want to disconnect the graph in a minimal way? Of course, you might delete quite a lot, but what's the minimum number of vertices to delete? 2, okay? Either these two or these two vertices, or also these two vertices, okay? But what's the minimum number of edges if you want to leave all vertices intact, but you want to delete edges and not vertices? At least 3, okay? These 3. Whereas small delta is 4, okay? Of course, if you delete these 4 edges, you leave that vertex isolated, and so you disconnect the graph. But in this case, there is the possibility of deleting even less, so 3. And so you have kappa equal to 2, kappa prime equal to 3, and small delta equal to 4. And so in this graph, you have the strict inequalities of theorem 3.1. Okay? Here I don't want you I just want you to be able to remember the definitions and to give examples. Okay? Blocks. A connected graph that has no cut vertices is called a block. Every block with at least 3 vertices is necessarily 2 connected. A block of a graph is a subgraph that is a block and is maximal with respect to this property. Every graph can be considered the union of its blocks. Okay? So if you have this graph, you have all these blocks, meaning that this, and this are the same vertex, this and this are the same vertex, this and this and this are the same vertex, okay? There is not just the fact that it is a subgraph which is a block, but also that it's maximal with respect to that property. This adjective maximal is important, and we'll have a comparison between 2 such adjectives, maximal and maximum. And maximal means that if you, in this case you have a subgraph, if you had even a single vertex, even a single edge, then what you get is no more in that condition. Okay? So for instance, in this case, you might have also a smaller subgraph, which is without cut vertices. Okay, I might take this 3, for instance. This is a subgraph which by itself would be a block, meaning there is no cut vertex. But as a subgraph of the whole graph, it is not a block in the sense that it's not maximal, meaning if I take these 3, it is, as a subgraph, it is a block, but there is a greater subgraph which also is a block. So when you split the original graph into blocks, you cannot take these 3 vertices and their edges, but all 4 of them, because of the need of maximality. Okay? We'll have several opportunities to look at this idea of maximal and to compare it with maximum. Okay, 4 minutes to 5, and so at 9 minutes after 5, I'll take again I start again. Okay, 15 minutes break. No, 11 past. Sorry, 11 past.